Dan Muse is now the 23rd head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I am Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever else we decide to put this. So I'm in the home studio. Wasn't really a good place to record this video after Muse's introductory press conference at PPG Paints Arena on Wednesday. It started just about right on time at 10 a.m. Kyle Dubas introduced Muse, gave a little bit of a synopsis about the process and the decision. And then Muse really took it from there. He spoke for well over 30 minutes, answering questions. And I think that's where I'll begin the analysis, the reaction, and my first impressions of Dan Muse. He gargantuan differences. I mean, Grand Canyon differences between Dan Muse and Mike Sullivan, both in stature and openness and candidness and forthright and earnest and genuine. Whereas Mike Sullivan, I mean, look, for the better part of 10 years, Sullivan steered the language. You could ask Sullivan just about anything. Well, at least most people could. Maybe I couldn't. And he would steer the language to kind of say what he wanted to say. He was quite a politician, a master in that way. Muse was not so guarded, not so parsing of the language. He just answered the questions. The one question, I mean, there were a couple of, I think, important questions we're going to get to and how his responses are going to shape, I think, how you view him. But obviously, my first impression of him, just in the first couple of minutes on the stage, here is a genuine and earnest guy. He's not big. He's probably about 5'9", maybe 5'10" or so. Also, after the press conference, he requested to meet the handful or more of the reporters who cover the team on a daily basis and who travel. He requested to meet us out in the hallway, just wanted to say hello and learn our names. I was like, wow, that's certainly an interesting twist. I think I've made the joke before. In 9.5 years, I don't know that Mike Sullivan knew my name. Full stop on that. He didn't need to, really, because media wasn't part of Mike Sullivan's purview. Whereas Muse, off the bat, saying, listen, we're going to spend a lot of time together. We're kind of basically working together. I'd like to help you get those stories, out to the fans and out to the public. So, as much as I can, we will talk. I was like, that was just kind of amazing to me. I almost hugged the guy because I think that's going to allow us to present even deeper analysis and really dig into some of the issues. Whereas in the past, I've given you my opinion, maybe with a video clip or, an X's and O's diagram or just a straight up, here's how it is, here's how I see it. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself with Muse's earnesty, but if he can offer some, insight. Let's just say, going back to Sullivan's decision for the past, in the final 10 games or so of this season, in which he played a pair of righties on one pair and a pair of lefties on the third pair. Now, that went contrary to 9+ years of Sullivan saying, I like righties with a lefty and lefty with a, you want it like to mix it. And Sullivan never had an answer for why Connor Timmins continued to play with Erik Karlsson, a pair of righties, despite the fact they were both all over the ice and struggling with it. His only response, the one time he was asked, and I never took a second bite at the apple, I think it was Josh who asked, you like the right with the left. What's, what are you seeing, or what's the story behind Karlsson with Timmins? And Sullivan sort of bristled and said, well, we're trying to put the best lineup we can out there. It would be nice to get some insight and feedback, regardless of what it is. You might not believe it, you might not like it, but I think that's going to create a bit more of a dialogue over the next couple or a few years as the Penguins sort of swing through this transition. The other little answer that Kyle Dubas gave. And I'm going to read this here because I thought it was really interesting, sort of unprompted. Dubas, in his praise of Dan Muse, here's what he said. And if you're wondering, well, why didn't Mitch Love get it? Or why didn't this guy or that guy get the job? Here's Dubas's answer. The key thing to me was that he was very adaptable, meaning Dan. There wasn't just one way that he wanted to be able to play, and he was very easily able to communicate the way that he would teach very different systems, which gave great comfort not only to me but our staff, that we weren't going to be bound by having to do one specific thing. Some of the coaches in the process had one way they wanted to play, and that's fine. That goes with all sports, but Dan's adaptability and the proof of concept with his past teams was very important to us. So really, I came away impressed with Dan Muse, not necessarily because he's going to be adaptable or I was the person early in the press conference, probably 4 or 5 questions in. So it was in the first 10 minutes, I think, that asked him about his coaching philosophy and if he was bringing a system to the team versus, going to, sort of adapt to what Kyle Dubas gave him to work with. And I saw Dubas kind of look at me, kind of catch like, oh, that's the question that I want to answer. But Dan answered it, and away he went for the most part through the 35-minute press conference. No ums and ands and oh, whoa, and no parsing of the language, no flipping the phrases or shutting down questions. Jeff Hathorn asked Dan Muse what in the interview process he did to stand out. That was the question that sort of stumped Dan, and I kind of appreciated it. Because, I mean, if you watched a lot of these videos, you know that, Francis Anzalone told us during this process that Dan Muse had a whirlwind sort of interview to get the job in Nashville some 5 or 6 years ago, that he just blew away everybody else and thoroughly impressed Peter Laviolette to the point where Laviolette was, I've been a coach for 20 years. I've never had an interview that good. But to Muse's credit, he had no idea. He's like, I was just me. I was just me. And if they liked me, great. And if they didn't, oh well. So that was the day one press conference of Dan Muse. I don't know if you'll like him or not. I suppose a lot of that has to do with wins and losses, progress of young players, how he brings along veterans, how he inserts or uses your favorite players in the lineup. I suppose all of those go into a fan's perception of the coach. To his credit, there isn't a system that he's bringing along, and he's going to kind of figure it out based on what Kyle Dubas gives him. He's going to teach, some basic fundamentals, and as he said, quote, build out from there. I thought it was a really good first day. I thought it showed a lot of understanding of the situation. Look, he didn't have to pull, me and Taylor and Josh and trying to think of who else, Mark Madden out into the hallway after the presser to introduce himself or to get our introductions. He didn't have to do that. And it wasn't pandering either. I'd like to think I've got a BS meter when some guy's, just slick hair and pearly teeth or wants to, glad hand you. Nah, it wasn't that. Because he had a reason for it. Like, hey, we're going to spend a lot of time together. By the way, I have no intention of doing 82 games next season. 0. But yeah, we will spend a lot of time with him. So we'll get to know him. And I got no sense that at any point what you watched was real. Or, what you watched wasn't real. It was all authentic. You can check out the press conference All 35 minutes on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now YouTube channel. So that's it. I don't have any great analysis. You can't win the Stanley Cup today, I suppose, but he comported himself quite well. Dubas really just kind of got out of his way, offered a few chime-ins, and that was it. 35 minutes. Check that out, and we'll talk. We'll do a live chat on Thursday because I'm sure a lot of you will have a lot of questions and maybe some stuff I haven't thought of about the press conference or where they go from here. We'll do that on Thursday. So like, subscribe, and we will talk soon, kids. Have fun.